How many of you have, some treasured possession, some prized possession in your homes, or locked away in a box, something or a box or something that you would say this is like a sacred treasure? Now, I'm not going to turn this around on you and say it's not sacred. How dare you use that word? It's just like something in a shoebox under the bed, the corner of the closet, some family keepsake, your old Letterman jacket. Nobody's wanting to get low Letterman jacket, an old Bee Gees album, something. Anybody have a sacred possession? Yeah. It's the kind of thing, this is what I have in mind, it's the kind of thing that, when somebody's like, oh, cool, can I take a look at that? And you'd kind of do one of those, and if you finally do hand it over to them, you're like the whole time, don't. Because you don't want them to break it, right? That's what we think of when we think of a sacred possession. Like, here's an example. It's from the Christmas story. It's the father from the Christmas story had this sacred possession, this major award leg lamp. He had won this, a magazine giveaway or something like that, this woman's leg in like fishnet stocking. And he's like, it's a major award. And he stuck it in their picture window, much to his wife's chagrin. If you've not seen the movie, spoiler alert right now, it gets broken. And the wife claims, I was just watering the plants. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. So it was a sacred possession. This is the point I guess I'm trying to make in all this silliness, that we all have a working definition that sacred means, don't mess with this. This is sacred to me. It's super duper important. And I'm a little bit concerned when you want to get your grubby little paws all over my sacred possession. I don't want you to break this thing that is sacred to me. Well, this morning, our connection with the text, as we continue in our Live the 10 message series on the 10 commandments, we're going to see that commandment number 4 tells us, that the Lord wants us all to have one thing in particular in our lives that is sacred. One thing in particular that we view as sacred. One thing in particular that we guard diligently so that others don't get their grubby little paws all over this sacred object. Well, let's pick up in our text in Exodus 20, verse 8 to see what it is. Exodus 20, verse 8, the fourth commandment reads, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Well, there it is. There's the sacred object, the object that the Lord wants us to diligently guard so that others don't get their grubby little paws all over it, is the Sabbath day. Now, the first question I want to answer this morning is, well, why do we call the Sabbath day sacred? What is it? Why do we call it sacred? Well, next slide. The words keep it holy in this verse. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. These words actually translate just one word in the original, and it's actually a verb form of the word holy. So if you can think of holy as a verb, holying, holyifying, to holyify. Remember the Sabbath day to holyify it. We have modern English words like consecrate or sanctify, set apart. But the idea here is that we need to sacredify this Sabbath day. That's commandment number 4. So in our modern parlance, in other words, we're saying, hey, this Sabbath day, whatever that is, remember to not mess with it. Take this Sabbath day and don't let others get their grubby little paws all over it and try to break it for you. And so as you think about your Sabbath day this morning, if somebody's wants to take a look at your Sabbath day and maybe do something with it, you got to do one of these, no. Don't mess with my sacredified Sabbath day. I don't want you to get your grubby paws on it. I don't want you to break it. So just by way of review, where we've come so far, at the top of God's top 10 list of wise decisions we can make for our lives, top 10 list of decisions we can make for our lives to go well, we have these top 4 commands, these top 4 principles. Number 1, read this with me. Put God first. That's number one. Number two, keep God first. Number three, take God seriously. And now number four, sacredify. Sacredify a Sabbath. We're not going to stick with that phraseology. That's pretty sloppy, but that's what we're going to work with here out of the gate. Number four, sacredify a Sabbath day. Now, if number four, I mean, this is really high on God's list of the most important things, the most wise decisions we can make for our life. We need to ask ourselves, what does it mean? What is a Sabbath day? Well, audience participation here. How many of you grew up in homes where the idea of the Sabbath meant Sunday? Anybody? Sabbath meant Sunday. Okay. How many of you grew up in homes where keeping the Sabbath holy then meant going to church, minding your P's and Q's, and God forbid that you should do anything fun? Anybody grew up in a home like that? Yeah. The Sabbath meant like sucking on lemons all day. All right. This next slide. This is some of us, thou shalt not as much as breathe on Sundays. All right, some of you know that one, right? All right, how about the other side of the spectrum? How many of you, like in the homes you grew up in, Sabbath day, which you didn't even call it that, meant sleeping in, not going to church, Dad would maybe go play some golf and watching football. Yeah. That's a good Sabbath day for some of the homes you grew up in. So, well, here's actually a good working pictorial definition of what the word Sabbath actually means. Next slide. Sabbath means to hit the pause button. To hit the pause button. It means to cease doing something, to stop doing something, to take an intermission from something, to interrupt something that's going on. So the idea behind a Sabbath, a day of Sabbath, the idea behind number four is not really, sucking on lemons and minding your P's and Q's on Sunday. The idea behind a Sabbath day is taking a day where you hit the pause button. Take a pause day and make it sacred. Don't mess with a day of pause. And don't let others mess with your day of pause. Don't let somebody get their grubby little paws, P-A-W-S, on your P-A-U-S-C, pause. All right, so this is now our working definition of number four. Let's read this together. Life goes well when I pause weekly. Let's do it again. Life goes well when I pause weekly. If you've been here the previous weeks, you saw, we took field trips to Deuteronomy 28, which tells us, where God says to us, if you keep my commands, if you keep all my commands, life will go well for you. Life will go well for your family because you're doing that which is good and pleasing to the Lord. And so that's why we have this phrase, life goes well. Life goes well when we live the 10. And number four tells us life goes well when we take a weekly pause. Life goes well when we pause weekly. Now, just as an aside here, I'm not entirely satisfied with this phraseology. I'm not entirely satisfied with the way we phrase number four because it doesn't capture everything that we're going to be talking about over the next few minutes together. But I wanted to keep this principle short and easy to remember. So can you just tolerate this phraseology for now? I think we can do better. If you think of a better way to phrase this, but a short, pithy, memorable way, then you let me know. But the idea here and the application here is life goes well for us when we set aside a 24-hour period in our week where we hit the pause button. God tells you life goes well when you live by this commandment. It'll go well for you. It will go well for your family if one day a week you hit the pause button. And so think right now, what would that day be for you? Scripture doesn't tell us as Christ followers, as New Testament Christians, that it has to be a Sunday. So think of your week, and think of Monday. Can you take the mon out of there and change it to Oh, I got Sunday, pause day, Tuesday, Wednesday, What day can you change into pause day in your week? That's what number 4 is telling us to do. All right, so that's the big idea here. Life goes well when we take a weekly pause, when we pause weekly. Now, verses 9 through 11 go on to help us better understand how it is that we can take a complete pause in our week and why it is that we should sacredify a pause day. And so let's pick up in verse 9. Actually, I'm going to start in verse 8. Remember the Sabbath, remember the pause day to sacredify it, says verse 8. 9, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. Now, I said just a moment ago that Sabbath, the word Sabbath means to cease from doing something, to pause something so you can do something else, to interrupt, to take an intermission from something. Well, verse 9 makes it clear what is ceasing so that we can pause. It's what? It's labor. It's work. It's 6 days of labor. And this verse doesn't mean just your occupation. It doesn't mean just your job. This last phrase, when it says, and do all your work, it implies, and all the other stuff that needs to be done. So 6 days you have to do your occupation and all the other stuff that needs to be done. And so for us in our modern culture, all the other stuff that needs to be done are things like mowing the lawn and doing laundry and are there other things that need to be done? I think that's about it. And even mowing the lawn is optional. But, all the other stuff that needs to be done. 6 days you have for your occupation, to wash the dishes, housework, yard work, etc. So as we continue then to build our understanding of number 4, what we now have is, all right, so take a pause day. Protect it from the other 6 days of the week. Make it sacredify this pause day. Set it apart from the other 6 days in which you do your job and all the other stuff that life demands that we need to do. All right? So far, so good? Pretty simple stuff. All right, now here is an important point that I don't want any of us to miss that's implicit right here in number 4. Namely, that God himself has said here in verse 9 that the normative life for human beings created in his image is a life of work. 6 days out of 7 attending to our occupations and all the other stuff that needs to be done in our lives. Did you hear that? The normative life from God's perspective here is a life of work. God created you and me as human beings in his image with the capacity to work 6/7 of our lives. Now, I'm not lobbying for a 6-day work week here. Some of you are like, whoa, glad. All right? I'm simply making this point, but it's an important point. God's ordained rhythm for a life well lived is a rhythm of work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, pause. That, says the Lord, is a good life. That is a life well lived. God never says anywhere in the Bible that work is bad. Never are we told in Scripture that work is a necessary evil. The Bible tells us, in contrast, that work was part of God's original plan for creation. In Genesis 1 and 2, God's perfect creation involved work. Everything in Genesis 1 and 2, God said, this is good. I created this, it's good. I created this, it's good. And I told the man in the garden, work the garden, and it was good. Work is good, says the Lord. Now in Genesis 3, after the human race disobeyed God, we see that bad things happened to work, but the fall, the sin of man, the disobedience of man, did not create work as an evil consequence of the fall. Work existed before the fall, and God said, this is a good thing. Work is part of God's original plan. And I've got more bad news. Maybe for some people, work is going to be a part of heaven. It's clear. We are going to work in heaven. I don't know, I'm sorry if that's bad news. God created us with the desire to like him. Because we're created in his image, God created us with the desire to like him. And we're going to see this in his example in a moment. God created us to work, to create, to produce things with our hands and produce things with our minds, to cultivate the earth and to cultivate the human race and to cultivate human history so that good things grow. That's what he built into us. And this biblical perspective of work stands in stark contrast to our mistaken American ideal that the good life is a life of R&R. Right? Isn't that what we believe? God says, no, the good life is a life of work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard. Pause. That's a good life. That is a good life. And these words then not only speak to this mistaken American ideal of R&R, it also speaks to, it speaks directly to, what is becoming more and more the attitude of American entitlement, a welfare mentality. A mentality that says, why work when I can get by off the hard work of others? All right? Well, here's why. God says the good life, the life I created you to live, is a life lived in the rhythm of work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, and then pause. And then pause. In fact, if we go to the next slide here, the word labor here in verse 9 means to work, it means to serve. It is also the exact same word that means worship in the Old Testament. So we can make a strong biblical case that God's view of work is worship. Work is worship. We view work as secular. God views work as sacred. And so we worship God when, in imitation of his divine image imprinted on our souls, imprinted on our minds and our hearts, we worship him when, like him, we labor to create good things, to produce good things. That is not only the good life, that, says the Lord, is worship. That is worship. So we worship God not when we just take, obey command number 4, hit the pause button and take a sacred Sabbath day, but we also worship God when we work hard, when we worship hard, worship hard, worship hard 6 times. Pause. As an aside comment here, our Amish neighbors got this right. They got the principle right here. You may not know that an important theological assumption behind the lifestyle they chose, or at least at one point in time, an important theological assumption was this very truth of command number 4. Work is worship. And so the question in their minds is, well, why then would we cheapen our worship by making our work easy? Understand that? That's where it all came from. Why would we worship God with this cheapened version of work? God, I'm worshiping you, but I'm trying to make it as simple and easy as I possibly can. Right? They got the principle right here. Okay, I'm not saying we should go to a 6-day work week, unplug, our electricity and trade our lawnmower for horses. Okay, just in case. What did Kent say this morning? I think he told us to go Amish. I think that's what he was saying. I wish I had a good Jim Gaffigan voice. You could know Jim Gaffigan? I think he's telling us to go Amish. I can't do it. Just let it go. All right, never mind. All right, this is what I am saying. I am saying that we need to bring our attitudes about work under submission to God's perspective of work. And recognize that work is normative. Work is good. Hard work is good. Good work is worship. Hard work is worship. And that God's ordained rhythm for a life well lived is work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, pause. Not pause, 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 pause. I'll work if I have to, I guess, a little bit. So here's the point from verse 9. In order then for us to fully understand what it actually means to take a sacred Sabbath day, to hit the pause day on one on one day of the week, we need to first understand that God intended pause day to be an intermission from the life that's well lived, working hard. Does that make sense? We have to understand pause day as an intermission from the normative life of just good, hard workship. All right, that's a point. Next one. I just want to keep unpacking the biblical perspective of pause day in verse 10. I'm going to pick up in verse 8. So remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Remember pause day, sacredify it. 6 days you shall labor, do your occupation, and do all your work, and do all the other stuff that needs to be done too. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God, and in it you shall not do any work. And so these last words, you shall not do any work, answer for us the question, well, what do we do on pause day? What do we do on pause day? Yeah, we don't do any work. The words here literally translate, you don't do the whole of your occupations. You don't do the whole of your labors. The whole spectrum of things that you have to do, don't do it. Don't do the whole of all the things that you have to do. And so here's the key idea. Pause completely. Pause completely. Work hard for 6 days. Worship hard for 6 days. And then sacredify a pause day in which you pause completely from the whole of the occupations which normally demand your time and your energy. Make sense? Don't do anything. There's a good kind of rough paraphrase. Just don't do anything. Right? And now here's some practical advice, just for what to do, what not to do. Is, if you, for instance, if you work on a computer all week for your normal labors, don't take a pause day on your computer. Right? Pause. If that's your work, you're not pausing. Get off your computer. If you work on machines all week, don't pause on machines. But if you sit at a desk under fluorescent lamps 6 days a week, 5-6 days a week, get outside on pause day. Go for a walk. Go throw a frisbee. Reintroduce yourself to sunshine. Right? You get the idea? Pause day. Pause pause completely from the whole of what normally occupies your labors. Just stopping it all. All right, that's another point. So continuing in verse 10, we read these words. So pause completely. Pause completely. Next point. Continuing in verse 10, but the seventh day then is a Sabbath of the Lord your God, and in it you shall not do any work. You shall pause completely. You or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. And so these words answer for us the question, who takes a complete pause day? And the answer, the key idea that I want you to observe here is everyone who is under your care. Everyone who is under your care. Did you hear the pronouns here in verse 10? Who takes a complete pause day? You do. You do. You are under your own care. Make sure you take a complete pause day. Your children take a complete pause day. They're under your care. Your servants do. And for those of us who don't have servants, I guess this could be generalized to employees, people who are in your employ. You need to take responsibility to make sure that they get a complete pause day. They're under your care. Your cattle do. Your cattle get a pause day, according to this verse. The original word is a general word, actually, for just livestock in general. And so even your livestock, number 4 says, give them a pause day. And then lastly, your sojourner does. So that means guests who are under your roof, guests who are under your care. Don't make them work on pause day. Give them a pause. So everyone who is under your care should have a protected, sacred pause day. And I have to admit that as I was studying this passage, I was struck by number 4's expectation that I am responsible. I am responsible not just for my own personal complete pause day, but number 4 holds me accountable to make sure that everyone who is under my care is being given and is taking a sacred and complete pause day. Did you hear that? So, and I realized for myself, as someone who has some tick marks in some of the check boxes in this list, that I have a responsibility to carefully guard and protect and to sacredify a pause day for my son as a father. I have a responsibility as someone who has employees that I'm responsible for. This verse says I have a responsibility to make sure that the staff of this church are getting a sacred pause day, they're taking a sacred pause day, that I'm not putting my grubby little demands all over their pause day. I'm protecting them from others getting their expectations on a pause day. It's sacred. It's sacred. And so ask yourself the question, who is responsible? Or who is under my care? You are. That's a certain answer. If you have children, if you have employees, if you have cows, this command holds you responsible to sacredify even their pauses days for them, to protect them from grubby little demands. All right, continue. Verse 11, we're given reasons why. We're told why we need to sacredify a complete pause day. Now, first we take complete pause day in imitation of God's example. That's why we do it. We see this in verse 11. I'm going to pick up at the end of verse 10. So in it, on the pause day, on the Sabbath day, you shall not do any work. You shall not do the whole of your work for, here's the reason, because, you shall not do any work because in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and he rested on the 7th day. So we observe a rhythm of hard work and complete pause because God set for us an example of hard work, complete pause. Hard work, pause. Now this is a very practical verse. The words of this verse are written for those of you who stress out when you take time off. These words are directly aimed at those of you who fall victim to the illusion, and the stress and the pressure that it's all riding on my shoulders. If I take a break, if I take a day off, if I let this go and I don't get on top of things, if I don't stay on top of things 24/7, it's all going to fall apart. Right? Some of you know that one. I can't afford to take a day off. I can't afford to hit the pause button. All right, so newsflash if I'm talking to you. The whole universe is, in fact, riding on God's shoulders 24/7. Not yours. Hear that? This is the fact of the matter. The whole universe is riding on God's shoulders 24/7 and not yours, and he took a pause day. So who do you think you are to hit the pause button? It's not riding on your shoulders. And herein lies an implicit reason behind pause day. Pause day is a day to recognize that it's not all up to me. It's not all riding on my shoulders, that I am not God of the universe, that I am not holding it all up. It's a day to recognize that the provision in my life is ultimately God's hands behind my labors, not my labors. Understand that? Ultimate provision in our lives is God's hands behind our labors, not our labors. And so pause day is a day to express trust in the Lord. I'm letting it go, and I'm trusting God that you provide. I am placing myself in a place of dependence upon you. I am not doing anything to acknowledge that I live in and I live by grace. And it makes sense that this is the implicit reason, if not the explicit reason behind this command, because if you think about the culture in which to this command was given, the Israelites had just been set free from captivity in Egypt, and so they were now living a nomadic existence, and they would shortly become an agrarian society. And so the command to take a pause day to a nomad, and take a pause day to an agrarian, a farmer, a shepherd, a rancher, that's a really stupid command, right? No, if I don't till the soil 7 days a week, I don't eat. If I don't eat, I die. If I don't milk the cows, I die. If I don't go hunting for, I don't know what nomads ate, camels. If I don't go camel hunting, I die. Right, you get the idea? This was completely crazy command in their culture. And so it's easy to see then that Sabbath rest, hitting the pause button for the nomads, for the agrarians, was okay, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting you that I'm going to eat. I'm trusting you that I'm not going to die. It's acknowledging God's faithfulness and his provision and his grace in our lives. And in our modern age, it's easy for us to lose sight of God's provisional hand behind our lives. It's easy for us to forget that it's God's hands behind our daily sustenance, because we think, I am eating because I am working and because there exists lances. That's praise my work, praise lances. And we forget that it is God's hand that is ultimately behind our daily bread. It is the hand of God behind every breath that we breathe. And so our weekly pause has to incorporate just stirring up the consciousness that actually I'm completely dependent on you, God, and I'm resting as an act of worship to acknowledge that. And you know, we don't have to go very far back as Hoosiers to recognize the truth of that fact. Last summer had a nasty drought, right? And that nasty drought should tell us that providence, the invisible hand of providence, is beyond the reach of hardworking humanity. The providence for our daily existence is beyond the reach of the industry and the intelligence and the mechanization of modern humanity. We are entirely dependent upon God for everything. And so we hit the pause button so we can rest in grace. God, it's your hand. It is your hand. It is your hand that sustains me. Does that make sense? So an implicit part of our pause days needs to be a stirring up of a prayer which sounds something like what I've just been saying. God, I'm doing nothing as an expression of my trust in you. I am not attending to the things that need to be done as an expression that it's in your hands. I live in dependence on you. I live in your grace. I live by your grace. And so therefore I rest. All right, so we take a complete pause day in imitation of God's example. Continuing in verse 11, another reason why we take a sacred pause day is in view of God, or we take a pause day because of God's view of pause day. God's view of pause day. Verse 11 goes on to say, therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and he made it holy. God's view of pause day is seen in two phrases here. He blessed the Sabbath day. That is, God said a complete day of pause is good. God says pause day is good. I bless pause day. And secondly, he made pause day holy. That's the second phrase. He made the Sabbath holy. That is, God himself sacredifies. He sacredifies a day that you take to completely pause from the whole of everything that normally demands your attention. And God himself says of that day, oh, don't mess with that. You're doing absolutely nothing. That's a good thing, and don't mess with it. And don't let anybody else mess with it. See that? That's God's view of pause day. And so the middle of verse 11 is talking to some of you right now. This is for us today. It's for some of us today. It's talking to those of you who feel guilty when you actually hit the pause button. For those of you who work hard, but whenever you pause, there's this voice in the back of your head that says, get up, you sluggard. Do something. Do something productive with your day. Right? Some of you know that voice. Some of you know that voice. Well, what is written in the middle of verse 11 is for you. And it tells you whenever you hear that voice of guilt trying to put its grubby little pause on your sacred pause day, you say back to it, I am sorry, guilt. But I am worshiping the Lord today by doing absolutely nothing all day. I'm doing absolutely nothing to acknowledge my trust in his provision. That's what I'm doing. Just take off guilt. I'm doing absolutely nothing to rehearse the truth that I live completely in and completely by God's grace. In fact, guilt, when God sees Butcher doing absolutely nothing today, he says, oh, that is good. He's doing nothing. That is so good. And he sacredifies it. He guards it. So don't mess with that, Leanna. I ad-libbed that first service too, and I figure I'm sleeping on the couch tonight anyway, so, why not? I'm taking my pause day on the couch. In fact, guilt, I am going to worship God right now by taking a nap. A really, really long nap. God says, oh, that is good. Yeah, I like that. Don't mess with that, Deanna. All right, you get the idea, right? That's how God views it. He blesses your pause day. He holifies, he sacredifies your pause day. Take a pause day. You can do it for those of you who need to overcome the guilt, just knowing how God sees it. All right, last point. We take a complete pause day in response to God's ownership of pause day. God's ownership. Not only the way he sees it, but his ownership of it. So if you go back to verse 9, the point I'm going to make is out of verse 10. So God says, 6 days you shall labor and do all the stuff that you need to do, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. It's the Lord's Sabbath day. And so who does the Sabbath day belong to according to this verse? It's the Lord. It's the Lord. Your complete pause day belongs to the Lord. It's his day. And so does that mean, since it's his day, you have to do whatever he tells you to do with his day? Yes is the answer. And what is God telling you to do on his day? Nothing. My day, I'm going to tell you what you're supposed to do with it. You ready for this? Nothing. That's what I want you to do with it. Nothing. Hit the pause button. Just do nothing as an expression of your trust and dependence upon me. Just take a nap in grace. Go throw a Frisbee in grace. See, the beginning of verse 10 is written for those of you who feel selfish about taking a pause. You feel like you have to justify yourself, when you're wanting to take a day off, to hit the pause button, and you have to justify that day against all the little grubby demands on your pause day. Oh, can you do this? Can you be there? Can you help me? Oh, well, it was going to be my day off, but I suppose. Right? Some of you feel selfish. But in verse 10, God gives us permission to say to those grubby little demands on our Sabbath rest, I'm so sorry. I wish I could be there. I really wish I could be there. But Monday is God's sacred Sabbath day in my week, and he's got this to-do list that he wants me to get done on his Sabbath day, and he's expecting me to attend to everything on that list, which is, by the way, nothing. But it's his day. Who am I to mess with God's day? I mean, if it were my day, if this were my day off, you'd have my time. But this is God's day. This is God's pause day. And I don't think he would be very happy with me if I let you get your grubby demands all over it and break my sacred pause. So we take a complete pause day in response to God's ownership of our pause day. So life goes well when I pause weekly. Let's read that together. Life goes well when I pause weekly. I pause weekly from the normative rhythm of good, hard work. And then life goes well when I pause completely. Life goes well when I pause everyone completely who is under my care. Life goes well when I pause in imitation of God's example of hard work. Pause. Life goes well when I pause as an expression of trust and dependence upon the grace and the provision of the Lord in my life. Life goes well when I pause weekly in view of God's view of pause day and in view of God's ownership of pause day. Say it again. Life goes well when I pause weekly. Amen. Let's stand